June 6, 1974. The Barents Sea stretched like a sheet of steel under the northern sun. On the surface, Soviet icebreakers followed routine routes toward Murmansk. In the air, only the waves of the air defense radar cut through the silence. 300 kilometers from the coast, at a base ringed by old snow and parabolic antennas, a dozen operators watched green screens that flickered with a hypnotic rhythm. It was 1417 hours, Moscow time, when a young technician lifted his eyes from his notebook. "Comrade Colonel, we have a return." The superior stepped closer, set his hands on the console, and watched the bright dot that had just appeared in the corner of the radar. It was faint, irregular, but it was moving at a speed none of them had ever seen before. "Altitude?" he asked. "More than 25,000 meters, sir." "Speed?" The operator hesitated. "Mach 3? Maybe more." The colonel frowned. On the screen, the dot advanced with a white line that lengthened far too fast, crossing the entire quadrant before fading. The computers calculated that at that speed, the object had overflown Soviet airspace for less than a minute. "It must be a calibration error," murmured one of the communications officers, trying to sound confident. But the colonel did not answer. He knew radars did not lie with that much precision. The data were clear. The object had moved at more than 3 times the speed of sound, at a height where no known aircraft could remain stable. By protocol, they sent an immediate report to Moscow. The response took 7 minutes to arrive, an eternity for the men who kept staring at the empty screen. The message was laconic. "No identification. Continue tracking." The colonel exhaled slowly and said in a low voice, "It cannot fly that fast." Over the following weeks, other radars in the north recorded similar signals, brief fleeting echoes that appeared over the Arctic and vanished before the alert fighters could take off. No camera caught them, no interception succeeded. The reports piled up on the desks of the Ministry of Defense with the same description: unknown object, speed Mach 3, north-south trajectory. In closed-door meetings, the generals were divided between disbelief and frustration. Some claimed it was a new experimental missile. Others, that the United States had found a way to make aerial espionage invisible. That day, the Soviet Union understood there was something in the sky their missiles could not reach. A black, silent visitor that left only a bright contrail before disappearing over the horizon. And though no one knew it yet, that fleeting echo was the herald of a new era. One in which knowledge would travel faster than sound, and where speed would become the most powerful weapon of all. Between 1960 and 1962, the balance of the world changed in shape. The Cold War ceased to be a matter of borders or ideologies, and became a competition of machines, of speeds, of impossible numbers. In those years, the sky stopped being a space of transit and turned into the new battlefield. On May 1, 1960, a Soviet SA-2 Dvina missile shot down the American U-2 spy plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers. The incident was a public humiliation for Washington. For the first time, the White House had to admit that its eyes in the sky could be blinded. Eisenhower ordered reconnaissance flights over the Soviet Union suspended. Satellites were still primitive, unable to offer the precision the CIA needed. Suddenly, the United States found itself blind again. On the other side of the world, Nikita Khrushchev celebrated the victory as a revelation. Before the Presidium, he declared that no American bird will ever fly over our sky again without being shot down. Soviet newspapers filled their front pages with triumphant headlines, showing photographs of the U-2 wreckage and the captured pilot. It was the perfect symbol of Soviet technological pride. Their radars had proved that the sky had a limit and that the limit belonged to them. But in the CIA's offices, that same pride became a challenge. If missiles could reach airplanes, then the future was not in flying low, but in flying higher and faster than any known weapon. Speed, more than power or armament, became the new form of survival. In 1961, with John F. Kennedy newly arrived at the presidency, the Pentagon issued a secret directive: develop a reconnaissance aircraft that could not be shot down. It had to fly above 25,000 meters and exceed Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound. In theory, if an aircraft moved faster than any missile could react, it would be untouchable. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union plunged into its own dream of invulnerability. The laboratories of Novosibirsk and Zhukovsky worked without rest on more powerful radars, supersonic fighters, and new defense systems. Khrushchev repeated it in every speech. Our missiles will reach any target at any point on the planet. The whole world heard his voice through black and white televisions amid applause and fear. In reality, both sides lied and feared at the same time. The United States exaggerated its technological capacity to deter. The USSR feigned absolute control of its defenses so as not to appear weak. Between propaganda and secrecy, the truth was lost. The only thing both understood was that command of the sky meant command of war. The downing of the U-2 did not close an era, it inaugurated one. From that day on, every kilometer gained in altitude, every decimal of speed reached, was a political victory. The war shifted toward the upper atmosphere, invisible to citizens, yet ever more dangerous. In 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought tension to its highest point. While leaders watched each other through the telescopes of fear, engineers were already building the future. The next aircraft would need neither permission nor apologies. It would be so fast it could not be intercepted, so high that no radar could follow it, so secret that its very existence would be denied. The sky was no longer a territory. It was a race. At the end of 1959, in a small unmarked office in Burbank, California, one of the Cold War's most secret projects began. The order came directly from the CIA. Create an aircraft to replace the U-2, able to fly so high and so fast that no radar or missile could reach it. The task fell to a division already legendary in the aerospace industry, Lockheed Aircraft's Skunk Works, led by the most stubborn engineer of his generation, Clarence Kelly Johnson. Johnson had already proved his genius with the P-38 Lightning and with the U-2 itself, but what he was now being asked seemed to defy the laws of physics. The new aircraft had to surpass Mach 3.2, 3 times the speed of sound, reach 26,000 meters of altitude, and sustain those conditions for hours without disintegrating. No known material could withstand such heat. No engine had been designed to sustain such pressure. In a meeting with CIA officers, Johnson sketched a long silhouette on the board. It had a spear-like shape, swept wings, and a sharp fuselage. "We will not need defense if no one can reach us," he said with his usual confidence. One of the agents present looked at him in silence before replying, "Then you had better never slow down." The project received the codename Oxcart, an anodyne term chosen to allay any suspicion. To the world's eyes, it did not exist. The tests would be conducted in a remote patch of the Nevada desert known as Groom Lake, later famous under another name, Area 51. Johnson decided to build the aircraft almost entirely out of titanium, a metal light and resistant to heat, yet difficult to obtain. The irony was that the only country with sufficient titanium reserves was the very one the aircraft was designed against, the Soviet Union. Through front companies and covert deals, the United States bought tons of Soviet titanium, which ended up becoming the skin of the fastest airplane in the world. No KGB spy knew it until years later. Engineers soon discovered that speed brought unexpected consequences. At Mach 3, friction with the air raised the fuselage temperature to 300 degrees Celsius. The metal panels expanded so much that the aircraft leaked fuel on the ground. The joint sealed only when it reached cruising speed. The fuel itself, a new type called JP-7, was so dense it could not ignite with a conventional spark. Technicians had to invent a special additive, triethylborane, that flared green on contact with air. The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines were redesigned from scratch. They were not simple jets. At maximum speed, they functioned almost like ramjets, using compressed air to increase thrust. The aircraft literally fed on the sky itself. The black heat-absorbing paint, created to dissipate heat, gave it its characteristic look and its nickname, the Blackbird. Every line, every rivet was designed with a purpose. At that speed, even a millimeter of irregularity could mean destruction. For 5 years, hundreds of engineers worked night shifts under oaths of silence. Their families believed they were making parts for civil transport. In reality, they were building a machine that could cross continents in less than an hour. In April 1962, the first A-12 oxcart prototype was ready. Johnson watched it in the Groom Lake hangar with a mix of pride and exhaustion. The black surface gleamed under the desert sun like the skin of an animal that did not belong to Earth. No one there knew whether that contraption could fly or would disintegrate on takeoff. 2 years later, the perfected version would receive a new name and a new purpose: SR-71 Blackbird. Faster, higher, more resilient than any aircraft ever to scour the sky. And most important, it was invisible to the enemy's reach. December 22, 1964. Dawn rose over the Nevada desert, lighting the dry mountains around the secret base at Groom Lake. On the runway, a black sharpened figure waited motionless in the cold wind. It looked like a prehistoric bird or a weapon fallen from the future. Around it, a small group of engineers and technicians watched in silence. No one knew for sure whether that aircraft would be able to fly. Pilot Bob Gilliland climbed with difficulty up the metal ladder. The yellow pressure suit he wore made him look like an astronaut. It was no coincidence. The SR-71 would fly higher than any other aircraft in history. Inside the cockpit, the air would be so thin that a pressurization error could kill in seconds. Oxygen was a luxury that had to be manufactured by machines. The engine roared with a deep, almost animal sound. The green flames of triethylberane, the ignition additive, lit up the exhausts. The aircraft moved slowly, shuddering as if waking from a dream. As it reached speed, the roar became a continuous thunder. The titanium structure began to expand with the heat. The fuselage stretched nearly 20 centimeters. On the ground, before takeoff, the joints lost fuel through the gaps. The aircraft literally dripped JP-7. Only when it reached Mach 3 did the metal plates dilate enough to seal completely. On the inaugural flight, the SR-71 carried no weapons or defensive gear. Only sensors, optical cameras, and a suite of instruments designed to measure temperatures and vibrations. That was its essence, a pure spy plane, created not to fight, but to see. At that altitude, no projectile could reach it. Its only defense was distance and time. The extreme heat created unexpected effects. The leading edges of the wings glowed. The windshield reached 300 degrees. Even the black paint had been chosen to radiate away part of the heat. Sometimes, during test flights, the aircraft returned with fuselage panels deformed, as if it had been on the brink of melting. Pilots soon learned that the SR-71 had a personality of its own. It could not fly slowly. If the speed dropped too much, the engines destabilized. Often, the only way to escape a problem was to accelerate. "When something fails, push the throttle," Gilliland said with a half-smile. It was both advice and warning. Every flight was a choreography between man and machine. The air became so thin at 26,000 meters that the rudder barely responded. Pilots relied on instruments more than instinct. The horizon was black, curved, and the sun blazed with an intensity that seemed unreal. From there, the planet looked like a blue sphere at peace, without borders, without noise. In the CIA's offices, the flight's success was received discreetly. No one outside the highest circles was to know that the U-2's successor now dominated the skies. The world believed the United States depended on still imperfect satellites. In reality, an invisible aircraft crossed continents at 3 times the speed of sound. At Groom Lake, the engineers watched the landing with their hearts stopped. When the SR-71 touched down, the fuselage still shone with heat. Gilliland descended slowly, removed his helmet, and smiled. "It flies," he said simply. The Blackbird had been born, a creature of fire and titanium without weapons or shields that did not need to attack in order to dominate, because at that speed, power lay not in destroying, but in seeing first. Between 1966 and 1968, the northern skies began to fill with rumors. At Soviet air defense bases in the Arctic, radar operators recorded echoes that crossed their screens in a matter of seconds. They were fleeting signals, too fast to belong to an airplane, too controlled to be meteors or errors. Technicians watched them in disbelief. Sometimes the echo appeared over Murmansk or the Barents Sea, at other times over Novaya Zemlya or along the routes of nuclear submarines. Always the same, a white line that entered and left Soviet airspace before anyone could react. In the first reports, analysts described it as a new type of American reconnaissance missile. The logic was simple. No human pilot could endure the forces and temperatures of such speed. In the Kremlin, the explanation was comforting. A missile, after all, could be intercepted, but the illusion did not last. The Northern Air Defense Command deployed squadrons of MiG-25 Foxbats, the fastest interceptors in the Soviet arsenal, designed precisely to face high-altitude threats. Each time the radars detected the object, the fighters scrambled at full power. They accelerated to Mach 2.8, the limit their engines could bear before melting. But even then, the target was always too far ahead. On one mission, Captain Yuri Andreev of the 174th Fighter Regiment described the experience in his report. "We climbed to 20,000 meters. The radar showed it ahead, but there was nothing in the sky. Only a fine white line stretching toward the horizon. When we turned, it was gone. We only saw its wake." Photographs taken from the fighters showed a pale, curved streak disappearing over the sea. There was no sound, no trace of countermeasures. Ground radars confirmed the object had covered more than 3,000 kilometers in less than 20 minutes. It was impossible for any known aircraft. In Moscow, the reports stacked up on the marshal's desks. The Minister of Defense demanded answers. Scientists at the Zhukovsky Institute analyzed the data and finally presented a hypothesis. It was an American reconnaissance aircraft capable of flying at speeds above Mach 3. But that explanation raised more questions than comfort. How can an aircraft move that fast and still be crewed? A colonel asked during a Politburo meeting. No one answered. Soviet engineers knew that at Mach 3, the heat of the air could melt steel, that fuselage joints dilated until they failed. And yet, the evidence was irrefutable. Whatever crossed the Arctic did so with surgical precision and without being reached. The Kremlin reacted with its habitual mix of pride and fear. An ultra-fast interception program was ordered, northern radars were reinforced, and development began on a new generation of missiles. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. The Soviet Union had no immediate answer to that black shadow crossing the sky. For the first time since the downing of the U-2, the roles had reversed. Now the Soviets looked upward, powerless, wondering what kind of American technology could move with such freedom over their territory. And as the radars kept recording impossible echoes, a new feeling took hold among Soviet officers, the forced respect that only impotence produces. They had dismissed that project as propaganda until they saw it with their own eyes, or rather, until they saw only its wake. The men who flew the SR-71 Blackbird resembled no other kind of pilot. They were a mix of engineers, astronauts, and soldiers, trained to withstand extreme temperatures, to think with precision under pressure, to breathe pure oxygen at heights where air does not exist. Most came from the Air Force, but in agreeing to fly the Blackbird, they entered a world apart, one where every second was counted twice and every mistake could mean death at 20 kilometers of altitude. The ritual began hours before the flight. In a pressurized room, the pilots donned yellow suits similar to those used by astronauts of the Apollo program. They were full suits, hermetic, with independent oxygen supply and a valve that allowed them to drink a liquid protein mix. For the next 6 or 7 hours, they would be their only protection against decompression. Outside, the aircraft waited with its bays open. Fuel dripped onto the desert's hot tarmac. Technicians checked once more the valves of the Pratt & Whitney J58 engines, which would roar with a sound closer to thunder than to a turbine. The air smelled of kerosene and hot metal. Takeoff was the beginning of a millimetric choreography. The SR-71 needed more than 4 kilometers of runway to lift off. At low speed, it seemed clumsy, heavy, almost unstable. But once it surpassed Mach 1, the aircraft stopped being a mechanical object and became something alive. Vibrations vanished, sound decomposed, and the horizon slowly curved. At 80,000 feet of altitude, the cockpit hung in a silence that seemed absolute. The sky was no longer blue, but a deep black speckled with light. From that height, the pilot could see the planet's full arc. The clouds were motionless layers underfoot, lightning flashed silently over continents. Up there, speed did not exist, only the Earth's steady drift beneath the fuselage. The flight was a succession of quick decisions. On each mission, the SR-71 crossed the edges of several hostile countries, the Soviet Union, North Korea, China, without officially violating their airspace. Its optical cameras and infrared sensors could record with precision an automobile on a road from more than 20 kilometers away. Every flight generated thousands of photographs and gigabytes of data that would be analyzed in Langley and at the Pentagon for weeks. Inside the cockpit, the pilot and his reconnaissance officer hardly spoke. Communications were brief, almost ritual. Altitude, 80,000. Speed, 3.2. Temperature, stable. Cameras online. The steady hiss of oxygen filled the silence between each report. There was no margin for error. A suit failure or a pressure leak could kill in seconds. An engine issue could turn the aircraft into a fireball at 20,000 meters. And yet every pilot in the program knew it was the safest place in the world. No missile could reach them, no fighter could follow them. At that speed, the border between war and peace was as thin as the aircraft's wing. A small change in course could turn a reconnaissance mission into an international provocation. The pilots knew it. They flew with the awareness that each twitch of the rudder could alter the planet's politics. When they returned, the aircraft landed still hot, with dilated metal and smoking wheels. Technicians approached cautiously, waiting for the fuselage to stop vibrating. The pilots descended in silence, faces soaked with sweat inside the helmet. Their reports contained no epic, only figures, coordinates, and observations. But each of those figures was worth more than an army. In the heart of the arms race, while the world counted missiles and divisions, American intelligence counted frames. Every SR-71 image was an invisible victory, a piece of information that could avert or trigger a war. For the men who flew it, the Blackbird was not an airplane. It was a promise. The promise that knowledge, if it flew fast enough, could outpace disaster. At the beginning of the 1970s, the existence of the SR-71 Blackbird was no longer a rumor, but an obsession for Soviet air defense. Northern radars detected it sporadically, a luminous point appearing and disappearing over the Arctic, moving too fast for tracking algorithms to compute its trajectory. In Moscow, officers knew that aircraft carried cameras able to record every military installation, every missile base, every nuclear reactor hidden behind the ice. It was an intruder impossible to catch. The Air Defense Command deployed every means at its disposal. First, the old SA-2 Dvina missiles, the same that had shot down Powers' U-2. But these barely reached 20 kilometers of altitude. The SR-71 flew at 26,000. The warhead explosions were lost far below, useless like fireworks in the polar night. Then, they tried the SA-5 Gammon, a much faster, more powerful missile designed specifically to destroy targets at great height. For months, engineers computed trajectories, climb times, interception angles. In theory, the SA-5 could reach it if launched at the exact moment and from the perfect point. But theory could not predict the SR-71's speed. By the time the missile climbed, the aircraft had already vanished from radar. In 1977, the Soviets began testing the new SA-10 Grumble, the jewel of their air defense, able to track supersonic targets with digital precision. Even so, the results were the same. The radars could register the aircraft's passage, but only as a shockwave, a secondary echo that faded before a lock could be achieved. At a base near Arkhangelsk, a radar commander summed up the collective frustration in a single phrase. "We can see it, but we cannot touch it." Interception calculations always failed by seconds. The missiles rose to their limit and ran out of fuel, losing themselves in the sky while the intruder continued on at Mach 3, leaving behind a white contrail that took minutes to dissipate. Each attempt ended the same way, with the silence of defeat and the empty hum of the radar. Pilots of the MiG-25 Foxbat, the pride of Soviet aviation, also tried to reach it. They accelerated to the edge of disintegration, with engines red hot and oxygen masks vibrating from the pressure. But even in the most optimistic records, the Blackbird always kept 10,000 meters of advantage and more than 500 kilometers per hour of difference. "It is like chasing a lightning bolt," one of them wrote in his flight log. Over time, frustration mixed with an involuntary form of admiration. Soviet pilots knew they were facing more than an RATO airplane. It was an idea, a concept of speed that brushed the inhuman. In the barracks, they spoke of it as if it were a mythic creature, a black hawk that crossed the sky too high to be reached, too fast to be feared. Radar operators gave it an ironic nickname, the shadow that leaves noise. Because the SR-71 was not seen, it was only heard seconds after it had already passed. Every attempt to intercept it ended with the same ritual: technicians reviewing radar tapes, commanders drafting empty reports, and the echo of failure resonating in the corridors. No missile, no fighter, no calculation had managed to catch it. And while the Soviets measured each error with a mathematician's precision, in the northern skies the Blackbird kept flying, oblivious to the fury it stirred below. The Soviet Union had become the hunter, firing at a ghost, and the ghost answered only with silence and speed. The SR-71 Blackbird was not just an airplane, it was a direct challenge to physics. Its structure was 93% titanium, a metal so difficult to work that more than half of the original parts broke during manufacture. On the Skunk Works assembly line, tools deformed with heat, welds cracked, and workers had to wear special gloves. Titanium did not forgive mistakes. At speeds of Mach 3.2, the air striking the fuselage reached temperatures capable of melting steel. The wing leading edges and the aircraft's nose reached 300 degrees Celsius, enough to toast the air brushing the surface. In flight, the entire aircraft expanded like a living organism. The fuselage lengthened nearly 20 centimeters, metal plates dilated, rivets vibrated until they seemed ready to snap. Every Blackbird component was designed to survive hell. Joints were built with flexible materials that endured expansion. The matte black paint, more than aesthetic, served to dissipate heat by radiation. Even the windshield was made of tempered quartz, able to withstand temperatures that would melt ordinary glass. The Pratt & Whitney J58 engines were the beast's heart. At low speed, they acted like conventional turbojets, but from Mach 2.5 onward, the design transformed. Internal doors redirected airflow, turning the engines into true ramjets, fed by the pressure of motion itself. In that phase, 80% of the thrust did not come from fuel, but from the compressed air rushing in. The Blackbird literally propelled itself with the world around it. JP-7 fuel was another marvel. Dense, heat-resistant, and almost impossible to ignite, it could burn only with a chemical spark of triethylborane, a substance so reactive it exploded on contact with oxygen. At each ignition, a green flare leapt from the exhausts like a dragon's breath. Pilots said it was the only aircraft that breathed fire before it flew. At those speeds, everything became extreme. Heat deformed metal, vibrations could fracture the fuselage, and the slightest imperfection could destroy the aircraft in seconds. Every flight was a wager against thermodynamics. Engineers knew the Blackbird should not fly. It had to survive flight. That is why the pilots nicknamed it the Black Dragon. In flight, the titanium plates turned a dark purple. The metal burned under the sun, and the engines roared like caged beasts. From the ground, the aircraft seemed to leave an invisible path of fire in its wake. One pilot, Colonel Richard Graham, described it this way: "We did not control it. We accompanied it. It was like flying inside a lightning bolt that never ended." The SR-71 was not only a triumph of engineering, it was a philosophical statement. It proved that technology could bend the laws of nature without breaking them, that speed was not just a number, but a form of dominion. In the air, the Black Dragon was invincible. And on every mission, returning to Earth, the still hot metal recalled what it had cost to keep it alive for an hour, a shield of titanium designed to challenge the very sky. Flying the SR-71 Blackbird was a feat of engineering, but also an act of faith. Every mission was a bet with death at speeds where nothing could fail. The engineers knew it. The pilots did too. And even so, each morning, men in pressure suits and serene faces climbed into a machine that lived at the edge of destruction. The Blackbird was fast, yes, but also voracious. At full power, it consumed more than 100,000 liters of fuel per hour. Before each incursion, it needed at least 2 aerial refuelings, one before entering hostile territory and another on the way out. The refueling maneuvers, carried out at Mach 0.9 and above 8,000 meters of altitude, were so precise that a minimal deviation could tear the wings off both aircraft. Pilots often said that was the most dangerous part of the flight, coupling to a tanker while they flew a machine seeping fuel and heat. Risk lurked in every minute. Heat could rupture fuselage joints. A pressurization failure could render the crew unconscious in seconds. A simple power loss in one engine could trigger an uncontrollable yaw. At those speeds, air was not an ally, it was a blade. During its operational life, the SR-71 suffered more than a dozen serious accidents. Some aircraft disintegrated in the air, others caught fire on landing. In every case, the causes were the same: an unexpected vibration, a miscalculated reading, a millimeter of error. Each loss was a painful lesson added to the flight manual. Inside the cockpit, time was measured by breaths and vibrations. The pilot heard his own amplified breathing inside the helmet, the constant hiss of oxygen, and the deep rumble of the engines. At 80,000 feet, the horizon curved and the sky was black, so black that the stars seemed fixed. From up there, the planet looked immense and silent. There were no borders, no visible wars, only the thin blue line of the atmosphere. Communications were scarce, only essential data, a monotone voice in the headset, confirmations of course and altitude. The solitude was total. In an interview, pilot Brian Schul, a veteran of the program, described it this way: "Up there, you do not fly over the world, you watch it. You are alone with the planet, and you understand how small you are." Sometimes, during the longest incursions, the aircraft pierced electrical storms, leaving behind clouds loaded with lightning that seemed like static. At other times, it crossed dawn twice in an hour. Time warped with speed. The world below seemed to move slowly as the Blackbird carved the sky like a shadow no one could catch. But that grandeur had a price. Every flight demanded months of maintenance, hundreds of technicians, and tons of fuel. Every mission was an orchestra of precision, a ballet of steel and calculus that could collapse with a single human error. Pilots lived knowing their aircraft was a miracle as fragile as glass. The SR-71 had been built to escape missiles, but never reality. Absolute speed was also absolute vulnerability. At those heights, a failure left no time to pray, only to fall. And yet they kept flying, because they knew that while they were up there, no one else would have to guess what was happening on the other side of the world. In the mid-1970s, the Soviet Union decided the SR-71 could not keep crossing its invisible borders with impunity. In Moscow, the Air Defense High Command gathered engineers, physicists, and elite pilots for a single purpose: build an interceptor capable of facing the Blackbird. The result was the MiG-31 Foxhound, a machine conceived not so much to fly faster than the enemy as to see it before it disappeared. The MiG-31 was the first Soviet fighter equipped with a phased array radar, the Zaslon, a system so powerful it could track multiple targets at more than 200 kilometers. Its new weapon, the R-33 air-to-air missile, could reach targets at altitudes above 25,000 meters. In theory, the combination of aircraft, radar, and missile represented the perfect antidote to the SR-71. In practice, it was still insufficient. Soviet radars installed in the Arctic Circle, from Murmansk to Tiksi, managed to detect Blackbird flights with greater clarity, but never in time. When the echo appeared on their screens, the aircraft had already covered hundreds of kilometers. Operators said the radar did not track the intruder, it only recorded its passing. MiG-31 squadrons were deployed at remote bases with orders to take off as soon as any suspicious echo was detected. On several occasions, they did. Pilots climbed at maximum speed, lighting afterburners to the metal's limit, but the SR-71, flying at Mach 3.2, simply kept going, out of reach. One of those Soviet pilots would later recall, "It was like running after a shadow. We saw it on radar, we saw it in the reports, but in the air, it did not exist." Even the R-33 missiles, pride of Soviet engineering, failed in simulations. The climb and guidance time was not enough to intercept a target covering a kilometer each second. Every calculation ended with the same conclusion. The aircraft escaped before the missile could draw near. Attempts to shoot it down continued for years. Each failure was filed under the same bureaucratic term: target out of range. Over time, frustration mixed with a quiet respect. Kremlin officers knew they were facing an extraordinary machine. In private, many admitted it. The USSR had learned more chasing the SR-71 than by analyzing it. In 1980, during a military conference in Moscow, a Soviet general summed up with irony that decade of fruitless pursuits. "We did not shoot it down, but we learned a lot chasing it." By then, the SR-71 had already overflown the planet hundreds of times. No enemy had reached it, no missile had grazed it. Every flight was a reminder that technology could be as intangible as a ghost. And, in an almost symbolic gesture, the Soviets stopped trying to bring it down. They no longer saw it as a direct threat, but as the enemy's clock, a reminder of how far they still had to go. The Blackbird kept crossing the northern skies, invisible and serene, while below, Soviet radars kept tracing its wake, as if trying to sketch the outline of a myth. In the 1980s, the sky began to fill with new eyes. Spy satellites, once experimental, became everyday tools. They orbited Earth with millimetric precision, sending real-time images of any point on the planet. There was no longer a need to risk a pilot or expose an aircraft. Surveillance had moved to space. The SR-71 Blackbird, that prodigy born of secrecy, began to look like a giant from another time. Its flights, costly and dangerous, no longer offered decisive advantages over satellites. Moreover, each mission cost millions of dollars and required dozens of people to prepare a single takeoff. Even so, the Blackbird kept flying. It was too fast, too elegant, and too effective to vanish just like that. During the 1980s, the aircraft continued to perform critical missions. It flew over the Middle East, the Korean Peninsula, and the shores of the Baltic Sea, always without interception. In those years, its mere presence was a message. The United States still dominated the sky. However, with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the enemy that had justified it ceased to exist. The world that had created it was fading before its eyes. The 1990s brought trimmed budgets, new priorities, and a new kind of war. The Pentagon bet on satellites, drones, and digital espionage systems. In 1990, the SR-71 was officially retired from operational service. Its roar went silent, but history still owed it one last mission. In 1998, with the Iraq conflict in full swing, a small Air Force team reactivated 2 Blackbird units. The objective? Conduct a reconnaissance mission over Baghdad. It was a symbolic flight, almost ceremonial. The aircraft took off, climbed to the edge of space, crossed the Middle East at supersonic speed, and returned undetected. It had done, once again, what no machine could do. When it landed, technicians approached the fuselage slowly. The titanium was still hot, vibrating with the echo of the flight. The pilot climbed down from the cockpit and placed a hand on the black metal. He knew it was the last time. On the other side of the world, at air bases in the new Russian Federation, some officers followed the news on television. Many of them had spent decades trying to hunt it, watching its white contrail vanish in the polar sky. One of them, a retired colonel, remarked with a tired smile, "They have finally brought it down, and we still never reached it." The SR-71 stopped flying that year, but its myth did not. In museums across the United States, visitors could approach its titanium remains and see its surface scarred by heat. No paint or words could convey what it meant to keep such a machine alive beyond the human limit. The Soviets, by then Russians, witnessed its retirement with a mix of relief and admiration. Relief because the world's fastest enemy would no longer scour their skies. Admiration because they knew that for 3 decades, no Soviet weapon had been able to touch it. The Blackbird had outlived the war that created it, And in its final silence, as the world looked toward a digital future, its legacy lingered in the air, proof that in its time, men had managed to fly faster than fear. We returned to the north, to a room lit by the greenish glow of monitors. Soviet operators watch in silence the bright line crossing the screen, a fleeting echo that appears over the Barents Sea and disappears before they can move a finger. Outside, the polar sky is calm. Inside, only the hum of the radar and the blinking of the fading dot. The commander leans over the console, tired, incredulous. "Do we have it?" The technician shakes his head. "No, comrade, it is gone. No one knows where it came from or where it went, only that it crossed the most watched country in the world without being touched, leaving nothing but a white contrail and a rumor." The SR-71 flew faster than any fighter, higher than any missile, and farther than any fear. The Soviets despised it until they understood they could not see it, only chase its shadow. For nearly 3 decades, the Blackbird was the perfect metaphor for the Cold War, a race to see before the other, to reach what seemed impossible, to move faster than politics, ethics, or logic could follow. In the reports, it was only a machine. In the minds of those who pursued it, it was something more, a frontier. Today, the SR-71 rests in museums and silent hangars. Its blackened surface bears the scars of heat, as if it still kept the memory of the skies it conquered. The children who gaze at it do not imagine that for years that aircraft was the limit of human knowledge. In its way, the Blackbird was a living contradiction, a machine created for war that, in its perfection, avoided combat. No enemy shot it down, no missile reached it. Its existence reminded us that power does not always consist in destroying, but in looking without being seen. In the Cold War, victory did not always belong to the strongest or the fastest, but to the one who understood that information travels faster than power. The Soviet radar remains silent. On the screen, only a faint line dies away slowly. And somewhere in the sky, far beyond the reach of missiles, the shadow of the Blackbird keeps crossing history.